Guys got so quiet all of a sudden. Like, you guys ready to rock and roll. All right. Calling the House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Chair Hoskins.
Here.
Representatives Grant,
Present.
Whitsitt, Neely,
Here.
Here. Liberati.
Here.
Here.
Tapia,
Here.
Farhat,
He was just here.
Miller,
Here.
Tisdale,
Here.
Van Workum, Martin,
Here.
Roth,
Here.
St. Germain. Here. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. First order of business is a little housekeeping. We are going to refer our first set of bills to our Housing Subcommittee. How I do that is I just have a letter here that I'm going to read in to the committee record. On March 23rd, 2023, Senate Bills 129 through 132 were referred to the House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business. Collectively, this package proposes to add housing development activity to eligible projects under the Brownfield Redevelopment Act. I've decided to ask the Subcommittee on Housing to review and make recommendations on this bill package. Ensuring the availability of affordable and accessible housing throughout the state remains a top priority for this committee. This legislation presents an opportunity for the subcommittee to delve into related issues in greater detail with all interested parties. I trust that the subcommittee will be successful and productive. So I just want to go ahead and take care of that. If the subcommittee makes a recommendation, it will come back to us ultimately for a vote. So with that being said, our next order of business will be taking up Senate Bill 35. We have a number of people who want to testify on this legislation, which is fantastic. First, we'll have Senator Jeff Irwin come up. He's the sponsor of Senate Bill 35. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Thanks for having me here in committee this morning to discuss Senate Bill 35. Senate Bill 35 was my attempt to get things rolling on the Senate side with something that I thought was at the intersection of important and easy. And it really comes, at least for me, out of my time in the House. Back when I served in the House, this was shortly after Governor Snyder had come in a big wave, and some legislation was passed to add an additional requirement to apply for and be eligible for food assistance here in Michigan, and that was to add a state-based asset test. At the time when this was enacted, I thought it was a poor idea. I voted against it, and now I'm proposing to repeal that asset test. When the asset test was first employed under the Snyder administration, it was started at a lower level. It was started at $5,000. And so if anyone had, a decent car from their previous job before they hit hard times, if they had any savings in the bank before they had hit hard times, they wouldn't be eligible for food assistance. And when I was a House member and this bill was this current now the law was being proposed, I thought it was just daft that the state of Michigan would spend its resources creating additional boxes for our residents to check regarding food stamp eligibility, so that if indeed someone did have a little bit of money, the state could then reject those dollars, take that family that was struggling financially, take that family that was low income, and refuse them that assistance, refuse all the cash registers in that community that assistance. And I just thought it was, like I said, kind of wild that the state was spending state resources turning away a benefit that was 100% federal and that these residents were qualified for based on their income. So with that, curiously long windup, I'm here to ask for your support to repeal that asset test because I don't think it makes sense fundamentally that we would turn away federal benefits from people who are low income and who have hit hard times. I do, as a small additional bit of background, I will mention that one of the things that Governor Whitmer did when she first got elected, one of her first actions, which I strongly applauded, was to raise that asset test to say, look, it's too low at $5,000. Let's raise it to $15,000. And so when she raised the asset test to $15,000, that meant that the box checking exercise over at the department to find out if people were over the asset test was producing very few hits at that point. There are very, very few people who are applying for food stamps who have $15,000. So at this level, at the level where the current governor has put it, it doesn't affect very many people at all. But the reason why I want to eliminate this act is because I know that in the future we might have a different governor. We might have a governor that wants to turn down the screws. We might have a governor that has less optimism about the ability of poor families to pull themselves out of hard times, and who has a more, frankly, cruel policy towards people who are struggling and who are low income and who are in need. So I'd like to get this law off the books so that a future governor can't turn the screws down on poor people and make it even harder for them to bring this federal assistance into our state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Any questions from? Yep. All right, Representative Tisdale.
Thank you, Senator. A couple quick questions. Do we know what it costs the state to administer this test every year, and do we have any idea of what it is captured in SNAP savings?
I skipped.
So we don't have good statistics for you on that. We asked that question in Senate committee, and the answer was that it's a relatively negligible cost among all of the administrative costs in the program, and they haven't taken the time to parcel that element of it out. Nor has anyone done a good analysis of how these additional questions could affect applicants in terms of their willingness to apply. So we did not have good information on that. And in terms of how much money is denied to the state in terms of federal, in the state's residents, in terms of food stamp recipients that are denied, we didn't have a good aggregate on that. Certainly what we did get from the department, and I think they're here and will testify as well and may have a better answer now, but I think what we did get from them is that with the asset test at 15,000, it's such a small number of people that are being denied that the answer to your question would be very small.
Thank you.
Representative Roth.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask the question. I have a little bit of concern with the amount of cash businesses we have today, with marijuana being a cash business. I just worry about some of this. Hard to report what somebody's income is, and unfortunately, I grew up in Clare County, which is one of the poorest counties in the state of Michigan. The abuse of our welfare system in any way, shape, or form was amazing in my hometown. Generational welfare, one after another. So I know how it can be abused. That's the only concern I have. I understand it may be not a big deal at the state. We're not, it doesn't cost us maybe very much, or maybe it's silly to do this, but I do have some concerns on that, just what I've seen over my years. So I hate getting away totally from an asset system, even if it was higher than that, whatever. For what that's worth, I'm sharing with you, sir.
Yeah, so my response for what it's worth is that we do need to be concerned with waste, fraud, and abuse across programs like this and across a wide range of programs. But something like an asset test does a pretty poor job of that, because people who are willing to commit waste, fraud, and abuse are willing to check that box saying, I have less than whatever the limit is, right? And so these are the kinds of policies that really only affect honest people. And it's one of the reasons why I think that in this case, it's particularly unnecessary.
All right. Representative Van Workum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for testifying today. I was a little curious about the logic. I think asset tests, and to Representative Roth's point, are there to ensure that it is a program that's helping the poor, and it's doing what it's intended. As I recollect, and I was not in the legislature at the time, But there was a lot of stories about how this program was being abused. Particularly, I remember college students using this program and having parties with basically their food assistance programs and buying all the luxury items and things like that. Would this have any impact on that sector, and would this impact that what was happening at the time with college students?
Yeah, I don't think so. Typically, college students don't have a lot of assets, so they wouldn't be affected by an asset test. But I guess I would just always encourage all my colleagues to be on guard for, sort of what sort of stories, make it out there. I heard some of those stories at the time as well. And for every kind of one individual out there who's a lottery winner who applies and gets, pilloried in the media, and there are 100 stories about, there are a whole host of, folks who are, retailers who are finding ways to defraud the system as well. And you don't hear those stories as often. So look, we need to be serious about waste, fraud, and abuse across the board. But if we've got someone who qualifies for 100% federal benefit, they're low income, I see no reason why we shouldn't allow that individual to get that federal support, to bring those resources into our state and onto their table, whether they're a struggling college student, whether they're a struggling single mom who's in her late 20s, whether they're an unemployed man who just lost his job who's 43. I think in all those circumstances, those individuals should have access to federal food assistance. It's frontline assistance. It's the first assistance people should be eligible for. It's food. So we should be preventing people from going hungry. And if those folks have just recently fallen on hard times and just recently had their income go down, and they might have a couple assets still in the bank because they were following the rules and maybe saving for a rainy day, I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I think we should still allow them to get that food assistance because they're still a part of our community. And whether it's a poor college student or a poor older person, if they're eligible by income, we should make sure they get their food assistance. That's my feeling.
I don't think anyone's arguing against that and arguing against the general concept of the food safety program. I think what the issue is making sure, as you described, that it is for low income. I think there's probably a better process for those that lost their jobs and are serving. I mean, that's why we have the Unemployment Insurance Agency to help with those assistance. I'm just concerned of just a straight line getting rid of an asset test, that it does open up more for that fraud and abuse. We want to make sure that these programs are helping those that truly need it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Representative Grant.
Hi, Senator Irwin. Thank you so much for this work and for remembering your work in the House and coming back to address some of the things. I think you clarified a little bit, but it sounds like we're still hearing a little bit of confusion of the difference between asset and income and why. So if you can just get directly into that. You spoke about someone having a car that might be valued at a certain amount or having some other asset and that stopping them from getting access to some support that they may need. And so to me, maybe we need to clarify a little bit more about why, like, an item like a car doesn't necessarily help you pay for groceries. I understand, but maybe if you can clarify a little bit why asset versus income is important.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question, and I don't know how exactly the chair has designed the testifiers here today, but it's possible that the department will come up after me and say some of the same things that they said in the Senate, which kind of walked through this process of what an application looks like a little bit more thoroughly than I could just off the top of my head. But you're absolutely right. When the federal government is looking at whether or not someone should be eligible for food stamps, they're looking at your income, and they're also, going to make sure that it falls under a certain level. And there's also some other anti-fraud tests that they do as well at the federal level. What we did at the state level is we decided to add this additional layer that says, what kind of assets do you have? And it started out very strict, where they were counting all sorts of physical assets and real estate and cars and things like that. The current governor has relaxed that considerably. And so they're at this point, at least my understanding is they're only asking about cash in the bank at this point over at the department. And so I don't know if that fully answered your question or not. I feel like I'm kind of fumbling around, but I did my best.
No, that does. I just wanted to clarify what kind of assets were being asked about. Anyway,
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Representative Grant. And the department didn't submit a card for testimony, but certainly if there are clarifying questions, if that could be clarified, if it wasn't clarified to the for committee members, I mean, I'm sure the department would be happy to answer that question in more detail. Any other questions for Senator Irwin? Oh, Representative Kofia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. This may be a question for you or perhaps the folks from DHHS or a department, but just a follow-up on my colleague's question or mention of the unemployment benefits. I know the costs of everything, including food, have been going up. That's been notable. So I just wanted to anchor in what unemployment benefits, what is that dollar amount right now that might be relevant in thinking about if a person with a family is drawing unemployment, do they still potentially also need food assistance? Because the unemployment payments might not pay for groceries. So I'm trying to anchor in what our unemployment benefits are currently.
Yeah, well, you put me on the spot there. I hope that this legislature will look at going back and extending and enhancing our unemployment benefits because they are an outlier among peer states. My understanding is, to hazard a shot at this, is I think the max now is $364 a week. So that'll give folks an idea of what unemployment maxes out at here in the state of Michigan.
Okay, you all set, Representative Kofia?
I'll just add that things like housing are costing people half of their income right now. So again, I'm just trying to do the household budget math. Even with an unemployment payment, paying your rent, you may have very little left to actually put food in the refrigerator. And like my colleague from Grand Traverse County, I also grew up in a very poor county, and I am empathetic to the situations that high poverty communities deal with. And this is an important resource.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity just to riff a little bit more on the idea that there's lots of different types of assistance that the state can offer. You know, if you've lost your job, there might be unemployment. There might even be opportunities for folks to get housing assistance in some narrow circumstances. I would argue too narrow. And there's things like food assistance. So there's a variety of different things that people can get. Food assistance should be the front line, easiest kind of assistance to get. That should be the first thing that we can direct people to and say, you're struggling. Well, here's how we can help you make sure you at least have food in your table. And so I want to make sure that food assistance, that first frontline assistance, is the easiest thing for folks to get, and that we eliminate barriers. And this is one small way we can do that.
All right, thank you. Any more questions for Senator Irwin?
I actually have a question, more of a statement.
All right, Representative Wissett.
I just wanted to say, being part of the working poor, I don't think a lot of people, unless you've experienced it, actually know what that means or actually feels like. And yes, you do have to report your vehicle. And yes, you do have to even report what's in your bank account. But the system is allowing you to be able to get those benefits. To be able to obtain more, to be able to obtain any, means so much to a person when they're struggling. And like I say, to be one of those people who knows what it's like, trust me, this is great legislation, and I appreciate you bringing it forward.
All right, thank you, Representative. All right, I don't see any more questions for Senator Irwin. All right, so thank you so much for coming in and presenting this. Next, we will have Rachel Richards from the Michigan League for Public Policy testifying in support of the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Hoskins and members of the House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business. I am Rachel Richards. I'm the Fiscal Policy and Government Relations Director for the Michigan League for Public Policy. We're pleased to be here to support Senator Irwin's bill to repeal the asset tax on food assistance. For those of you who aren't familiar with the League, we are an over 110-year-old organization, nonpartisan and research and advocacy organization that works towards bettering health, educational and economic security outcomes for Michiganders who have been historically left out of prosperity. Senate Bill 35, sponsored by Senator Irwin, is common sense legislation that would put Michigan in line with 36 other states as diverse as Alabama, New York, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin that have already eliminated their asset tests as an eligibility requirement for food assistance. Eliminating the SNAP asset test will help more Michigan families, encourage bank savings, help reduce paperwork for departmental staff, and will not cost our state any money. The bill would have a significant benefit on more Michigan families. SNAP helps about 710,500 households, including more than 531,000 children. Hard financial times are disruptive to families and children, and requiring families to spend down their savings in order to receive temporary help as they look for work simply punishes these families. Eliminating the asset test also encourages bank savings. A study by the Urban Institute found that eliminating asset tests leads to a 5% increase in lower-income households with a bank account. Having a bank account helps families conduct basic financial transactions without large fees or interest payments, helps them save for emergencies, helps them build credit, and have access to affordable credit. Finally, because SNAP is 100% federally funded, this bill would not increase costs on our state budget. In fact, SNAP helps stimulate local economies by ensuring families have enough money to buy food at their local grocery stores. Additionally, eliminating the asset test could help reduce paperwork for Michigan Department of Health and Human Services frontline caseworkers who have such high caseloads that it can be difficult to give public assistance recipients the attention that they need. Therefore, we urge the committee to support Michigan families and economies by passing Senate Bill 35 to eliminate the asset test on food assistance, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Ms. Richards? All right, I'm seeing no questions. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Sarah Ishmael from Access, wishing to testify in support of the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Hoskins and the members of the House Committee on Economic Development and Small Business. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify on Senate Bill 35. So my name is Sarah Ismail. I'm a state postal associate with Access. Access is a nonprofit serving Southeast Michiganders, in particular American communities, but anyone that walks through their doors. So Access currently is a community-based organization with over 150 programs and has a very comprehensive program model of service delivery for diverse communities, including low-income and immigrant communities. I'd just like to highlight that Senate Bill 35 would remove the asset test for eligibility for SNAP benefits in Michigan. Michigan is currently one of 5 states that still has the asset test. As a former caseworker, I've seen firsthand the effects of what the COVID-19 pandemic has done. So the COVID-19 pandemic, along with so many other factors, have affected our communities. As a former caseworker, I saw firsthand how we had clients come in particular one client who had, just like everyone else, put off seeing a doctor during the pandemic. He lost his job, and when losing his job, he lost his health insurance on top of that. So during the pandemic, he was actually diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer, and his life savings was fully lost, and he had nothing to fall back on, and the only thing that he had was SNAP benefits. SNAP benefits provided him with food security along with him and his family, and these were the only things that kept him going as he fought this terrible disease. So I urge the committee and Senator Hoskins, Representative Hoskins, to remove the asset limit for Senate Bill 35, just because we have seen what our communities in Michigan have gone through. Thank you.
All right, any questions from committee members? All right, thank you so much for your testimony. All right, next we have Colin McDonough from the American Heart Association, wishing to testify in support of the bill.
Good morning. Chair Hoskins, Vice Chairs Grant and Tisdale, and members of the House Economic Development and Small Business Committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Colin McDonough, and I am the Michigan Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association strongly supports Senate Bill 35, which would remove the asset test as a component of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, or SNAP, application in Michigan. Healthy eating is one of the foundations of a heart-healthy lifestyle. More than 1 in 10 families in the U.S. rely on SNAP benefits each month. Further, more than half of all SNAP benefits go to households with gross incomes less than or equal to half of the federal poverty line. In 2016, more than 6 million households had very low food security, meaning at least one person in the household did not have enough to eat. A 2013 USDA analysis found that participating in SNAP for 6 months was associated with a 6.3 percentage point decrease in households that experienced very low food security. SNAP helps households improve food security, reducing the number of people who skip meals because they don't have the money or resources to buy enough food. Research shows that low-income adults participating in SNAP have lower overall health care expenditures and Medicaid and Medicare costs compared to non-participants. By encouraging and promoting healthier eating habits for all Michigan residents, we can help mitigate one of the root causes of chronic disease like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes. Michigan is one of only a small number of states that utilizes an asset test as part of the application for SNAP benefits. Asset tests can prevent low-income Michiganders from accessing benefits and discourage financial independence. Eliminating asset tests promotes long-term savings and economic independence rather than dependence on immediate aid. Asset limits can restrict a family's economic mobility by discouraging them from saving up for a security deposit, financial emergency, a down payment, or post-secondary education. Families need to deplete savings and sell assets to qualify for benefits, sending the message that they should spend instead of save. Eliminating asset tests removes barriers that prevent households with modest savings that are struggling with food insecurity, helps the newly jobless more readily apply for SNAP benefits during a critical time, eases verification demands and case processing burdens for the state agency and households alike, and brings greater federal funding into the state. Asset limits have negative impacts on the effectiveness of the program as a conduit for self-sufficiency, do not prevent wealthy people with considerable savings from receiving funds from anti-poverty programs, and have a negative effect on deterring people from saving so they can transition from government dependence to self-sufficiency. Families shouldn't have to choose between saving for emergencies and putting food on the table. I urge you to support Senate Bill 35, and I am happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from committee members? All right, thank you so much for your testimony. Is someone here from the African Bureau of Immigration and Social Affairs? Oh. All right, you're wishing to speak in support of the bills.
Data, and I am here on behalf of the African Bureau for Immigration and Social Affairs, mostly known as ABISA. We advocate for our communities to bridge the gap.
Could you turn your mic on there?
I'm sorry. So, I'm going to start again. Apologies. My name is Fanta, and I am here on behalf of the African Bureau for Immigration and Social Affairs, also known as ABISA. We advocate for our Black immigrant communities throughout Michigan and the United States to bridge the resource gap. And we try to ensure especially that no one is left out, especially on account of language access. I am here on behalf of that community today to support this bill. The SNAP program should be our nation's #1 defense against hunger and curbing poverty. And a lot of our immigrant communities, unfortunately, are unable to have access to this because of language access and other racial injustices that they have to face on a daily basis. So because of that, a lot of stigma and the complicated nature of the process involved in the SNAP application, it actually hinders their ability to get access to the program, and this also makes it very hard for them to be able to thrive and generate much needed local economic activity in the state that they're living in here. The asset limit makes it especially more difficult and challenging for them to be able to qualify. So I am here today to urge you, please take into consideration that you are serving a community that is very diverse, whose first languages are typically not the English language. And it does not mean that they are unable or incapable of learning how to speak the language, but it's very hard to be in a country where your language is not being spoken. Oftentimes, the community we serve, the languages that they speak are not written. And so that makes it very hard for us to be able to offer them interpretation services because the state of Michigan makes it very hard for us to be able to do that. We cannot write our languages, so therefore I cannot be a qualified interpreter because I cannot sit the exam so I can interpret for my community. So if they go to DHS or MDHHS and they're needing interpretation over the phone, they cannot call me because I am not on their list. So I'm here today urging you to please take that into consideration, that these people are in need of this bill to be passed and the asset limit to be removed so that they're able to thrive and be able to stay afloat with their families. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions from committee members? All right, thank you so much for your testimony. All right, I think that is everyone who wished to speak on the bill. I'm just going to read in the cards of people who did not wish to speak. We have Todd Tennis on behalf of the Center for Civil Justice in support of the bill. Lisa Ruby from the Michigan Poverty Law Program, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Leah Bacon from the Center for Employment Opportunities, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Melina Brand from the National Association of Social Workers, I think, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Stephanie Johnson from the Food Bank Council of Michigan, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Amanda Klein from United Way of Southeastern Michigan, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Someone from the department. Department of Health and Human Services in support of the bill. Rob Kennedy from Michigan Community Action, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Jessica Akmoudi from the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. Barbara Bloom Alexander and Dr. William Dietz, the co-chairs for the Authority Health Motion Coalition, not wishing to speak in support of the bill. And Loretta Bush, CEO of Authority Care, not wishing to speak in support of a bill. All right. Next, we will have a presentation from Business Leaders of Michigan. Looks like we have Lindsay Case Palsrock and Gabe Rodriguez Garriga. All right. Looking forward to you all dazzling us with this presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Case Palsrock, and I am the Vice President of Government Affairs for Business Leaders for Michigan. I have today my colleague Gabe Rodriguez, who is our Vice President of Strategy and quite the expert when it comes to all things economic development. For those of you who are not familiar with Business Leaders for Michigan, we are the state's business roundtable, And our board is comprised of the state's chief executive officers or principals of the largest companies in Michigan. Let's see here. Our vision is to make Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, education, widely shared prosperity, and a healthy economy. And our role is really dedicated to benchmarking, convening, and advocating in service of making Michigan top 10. And collectively, our members there we go, drive 40% of our state's economy. We generate over $1 trillion in annual revenue. We employ more than 540,000 people in Michigan, and we educate more than half of all of Michigan's public university students. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Gabe to get into some numbers and data, and hopefully we can dazzle. Tall order.
Thank you, Lindsay. So when people ask us all the time, what is top 10? And we've looked at over 60 different metrics and tracked what ties together to identify widely shared prosperity and get a holistic look at the economy. And these are the 8 metrics that have come out in terms of that. This 8 metrics identify our top 10. Labor force participation rate, GDP per capita, median household income. You'll see poverty rate was a new addition last year that was put in to really take a holistic look at the economy. CEO business climate perception, net business creation, net talent migration, who's moving to Michigan, as well as the percent of population with a higher degree or certificate. So when you look at it, there's some things that are higher, you know, in terms of we're doing pretty good in business perception, business creation, and net talent migration, and there's a lot of metrics in the 30s around percent of population with a higher ed degree, poverty rate, median household income, GDP per capita. A lot of these are driven by exactly what your committee is charged with, economic development and small business. So let's dive into income a bit. When you look at Michigan's income rates compared to the U.S. average, we were actually above the U.S. average in 1980, and we maintained that strength above the U.S. average until around 2000. That's when you see the divergence in the 2 lines. Blue line is Michigan, orange line is U.S. average. And what you see is that it really tied together with a lack of manufacturing jobs as well as a lack of growth in professional and business service jobs. And we'll touch base in a little bit on what those jobs are. But this is the professional and business service job growth. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so people can see the title. Oop, there it is. When you look at the growth rates, Michigan grew 0% in the last 23 years, and the U.S. has grown 35% in the last 23 years. This is a huge concern, and when we're talking about professional and business services jobs, these are engineers, research individuals, design, HR professionals, accountants, management professionals in different businesses, headquarters jobs. We've grown 0 in the last 23 years. And why this is really concerning to our members, when you look at it, the data, is that these knowledge economy jobs in professional and business services are making up most of the U.S. job growth in the future. So 2 million of the new good jobs that are coming into the U.S. is in professional business services compared to these other metrics. So we really need to think about what it takes to grow this knowledge economy jobs. When you're looking at people movement as well in terms of talent migration, Michigan's losing talent to knowledge economy hubs as well. 9 of the top destinations for our talent in the last 11 years were to top 10 states for knowledge economy jobs. So people are moving to where these jobs are growing, and they're moving out of Michigan. The other piece of the coin, besides the jobs, we looked at it in terms of jobs. Now let's look at it in terms of education. These jobs are requiring a higher education, which is really driving a significant income gap. In 1981, if you only had a high school degree, you were about 8% off the average for income growth, of the average income for the whole state. Now, if you only have a high school degree, you're 30% below the state average income. Really showing, and you can see who's done better off. This is adjusted for inflation. You see a little bit of growth in orange bar, which is only high school degree, but a huge growth in this bachelor's or more category, 40% growth. It's almost double if you have a bachelor's degree compared to just a high school degree. And what's really tied to post-secondary attainment is K-12 education. Where voters rank Michigan's K-12 system, we've asked them this many different times. They consistently rank Michigan around middle of the pack, 25, 26. But when you look at the actual rankings of Michigan's education system, we're 40th in kids count, 40th in 4th grade reading, and 42nd in high school graduation. one piece that we tie education to economic development even further, we've looked at different data and statistics and said, what is it that ties to people working in the workforce? Labor force participation rate, which is what we want to see, right? All of our individuals participating in the economy. The number one metric that ties to it, 8th grade math. So if you can teach eighth grade math to the population, that's the level of education really required to participate in the workforce. Really critical here. Another concerning stat is our educational attainment rankings. Right now, we are last in the Midwest, 37th. And this is certificates, degrees. We were 32nd, middle of the pack in the Midwest in 2014. We've dropped 5 spots and are now, behind Indiana, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Illinois. And the South is quickly catching on our heels. So when you're looking at the knowledge economy, we also wanted to acknowledge the importance of manufacturing. 170,000 jobs are at risk with the electric vehicle transition. 15% of the state's jobs are still in manufacturing, the largest sector in Michigan's job growth. So it's really a critical sector to consider. 170,000 jobs at risk for the EV transition. That's combined total jobs in the cities of Lansing and Grand Rapids. So a huge loss opportunity. In the last year and a half, Michigan has seen significant growth in the battery electric vehicle transition, which is successful. We only had 2 out of 10 announced battery plants back in September 2021 when Ford made their Blue Oval announcement in Tennessee. Since then, Michigan has won 5 different battery plants, where the rest of the nation has gotten 15. We're now at about 28% of all announced battery plants, which is a big win. We're only 25% of the internal combustion engine jobs in the US. So we're actually doing better right now in batteries than we were in the past. And that really comes down to what we're here today to share with you, which is our holistic economic development framework. We really see economic development as not being one piece of this puzzle. I know there's been a lot of discussions in the last few months and last years around SOAR, but really we see economic development as place. What is the industrial site place? What does the community development and housing look like in a community? Talent around the importance of 4-year degrees that we mentioned and community college improvement, K-12 reform. Are we able to attract and retain the talent? Entrepreneurship and innovation. When we're talking about Sparks and Anchor institutions, Sparks are entrepreneurial organizations that spit out entrepreneurs. Think of your 100K ideas or different organizations that support entrepreneurs at the beginning. Anchors are institutions like the Medical Mile or Corktown, places where entrepreneurs can come and grow and go from 2 people to 20 people or 2 people to 50 people. We need to really invest in this ecosystem for growth and get more VC, seed, and angel funding. Customer service is critical for all company growth. We need to make it easy for businesses and entrepreneurs to grow. And when we think about customer service, this is ease of regulations. This is working with business, understanding the transparency, understanding where you are in the queue when you're going to different state agencies. And what we see this as is really core to equity as well. Because what we see is businesses that have a large government affairs association can go through and figure out the pathways to get through all the different government bureaucracy. But if you're a small startup, if you're a small company that doesn't have that access, you really don't get the same level of customer service. And the last piece is we have to recall that this investment that companies are putting in place is competitive by nature. They're looking at other companies, they're looking at other states to move, even internationally in some cases. So we need an effective toolbox, one that takes into account both cash options as well as things that target the knowledge economy. And when we're talking about targeting the knowledge economy, it's R&D tax credits, it's a payroll tax credit. One of my favorite anecdotes, the story is Good Jobs for Michigan, which I know Representative Tisdale knows well. KLA Associates is a startup out of Silicon Valley. It says, I'm gonna put 600 jobs here in Michigan, in Ann Arbor. And we gave them $1.5 million of cash up front, that's it, $1.5 million for 500 jobs. And we said, keep 8 years of your payroll taxes as an incentive to move here. And these are high-paying jobs, so it's a higher impact. So 8 years of when you're paying payroll taxes on over 6 figures, that incentive matters. That's a big incentive for these companies. So suddenly you have a tool that attracts knowledge economy and higher-paying jobs. And the other thing we wanted to leave you with today is, I'm sure you're all well aware of why economic development and small business matters, but what we've heard a lot when we talk to constituents and others, they think economic development is a shovel in the ground far away. But that's not what we see. We see opportunities for our kids so they don't have to or want to move away. We see a welcoming state that acts as a magnet for talent and entrepreneurship from across the world. We see pathways to prosperity out of poverty for all residents, a high-quality, affordable childcare, healthcare, housing, feeling of vibrant, safe communities, and a high quality of life with supported downtowns. And that's it for our presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for that. I am adequately dazzled. I have a few questions. Let's start with the education part, because that's certainly seems to be a quite important piece, this economic development question. And I'm just curious, what states are doing education very well that you guys know of?
Yes, yes. We can point to a few examples and likely ones that you've heard about before, but I'll talk about Massachusetts and Tennessee. These are both states that, Massachusetts is probably more of a 30-year journey. Actually, they had a lawsuit in the 90s, I believe, that charged them as a state of completely sort of rebooting their strategy, their funding mechanism, et cetera. They've been first in the nation for a long time, and we know that some of that is attributed to the fact that they have a much higher percentage of their population with higher education, which tends to mean that the K-12 schools do better. But frankly, you know, one-to-one, that's not it, right? They've aggressively tackled really, you know, growing the educator workforce and raising the bar, treating and supporting educators well, very high standards, performance standards for what it takes to get a diploma in Massachusetts. And Tennessee is another one that, you know, 15 years ago was in the bottom. You saw them as 47th, 48th, and their growth has been incredible. And a lot of that we really attribute to the fact that they've kept a consistent strategy. They've switched parties in terms of the executive office. They've, you know, this has been over the course of several governors and legislatures, and they've really stayed the course. Their kind of pillars there were really being obsessed with educator quality, support, training, and it's paid off. So now I think they're third in terms of education outcome growth over a 15-year period, and we look to those states as states that have really shown us what's possible, and frankly, in both places have been a coalition of educators, philanthropic organizations, and business that drives it, because it's bigger than any one group or any one part of the K-12 system.
All right, what are some of the things that we could be doing here in Michigan, do you think? Like, I mean, obviously, like you said, Massachusetts, this is like 30 years ago, and same thing with Tennessee, this is something that started years ago. But what are some of the things that we can be doing now? What are some of the things that we currently are doing now that are helping and things that we can add to it?
So I think if you look at the bubble, there's lots of different areas to jump in and different pieces. But one, I'm going to talk about the sites. So we put $250 million last year into sites. I think that's a good start and something we want to continue to focus on. And really, when we think about site funding, we envision a mosaic of sites across the state. So, you know, we have a map. We've worked with economic development leaders of Michigan, regional economic development groups, to say, what are your highest value sites that the state could invest in that then you can go off and sell? And the map, it looks riddled with different sites across the state, and probably many in your different districts. So I think that's one that we could start on right away. The other piece that we've seen as an area to drive quick improvement to get to a long-term goal is within community colleges. There's different programs that we've researched and identified in terms of the CUNY model, which is the ASAP model in New York. So it's the College University of New York. They were able to drive in 3 years, they changed graduation rates from in the mid-20s to high 50s in terms of 3-year graduation rate. So what would we say would say there's a few things that you can really spark the growth, but what we need is consistency in this strategy to focus on these 5 different areas around entrepreneurship, innovation, customer service, as well as competitive incentives, which I talked about the knowledge incentives already.
All right.
And did you have a specific question related to K-12 there with that question, or was that a global question?
Sure,
Because
let's go there too.
Wanted to make sure we were you know, being responsive to your question. On education, I think there's 2 things that we can kind of stress as themes, but know that we've been involved in a group called Launch Michigan there is a framework that exists that highly resembles what Maryland has done over the last several years, and Maryland was able to pass a top-to-bottom, updated their K-12 system, really transformational, and the funding to go along with that. But I think equity is a huge focus for us, and it's something that we see progress in year over year. It's not a one-time infusion, and now we're equitable. Frankly, the House budget passed, really robust increase for our at-risk students, and we think that without prioritizing those with more needs, whether that's special needs, poverty, English language learners, we're never going to see the outcomes in this state that we need to see, frankly, for our workforce, but also that are fair and equitable and right. And then secondly, I think a very high performance standard. We talk about accountability, but it's not just how can I point to a school and say you're bad or you're good. It's really what is the goal setting experience of the state like? How do we set that standard that says in Michigan, if you graduate with a diploma, you will be able to at least enter community college certificate program without remediation. Students who remediate, those who have to take no credit classes, 90% of them never end up with any type of degree, certificate, or diploma. So we really got to reverse engineer the system to say what do all students need to be able to do and be, and at what level should they be able to perform, and then figure out what is the suite of goal setting, interventions, and high standards, and support. And lots of support for educators, lots of support for our students, specifically with those with more needs.
All right, thank you so much for that. Representative Tisdale and then Representative Martin.
Thank you, Chair Hoskins. Lindsay, I think it was the initial slide, you talked about your members educate half of the students in the state. Would you like to explain that, please?
Sure. We, when Business Leaders was formed, we are unique, from other business groups in the state for a variety of reasons. But there was a deliberate focus on the access of education and the economy, right? So the three largest universities, our research universities, their executives, their presidents, are on our board. They sit alongside the CEOs of these large companies that you saw on that slide. And so Wayne State, Michigan State, and the University of Michigan are part of our work, our vision, and our board of directors.
So your board members are executives of the large research universities, and that's where that came from.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and again, the CEOs themselves sit on our board, and we tend to not advocate on specific one-off policies for their industries. They come together and say, what's the Michigan agenda? What's the Michigan competitiveness agenda? And they lend their support through BLM there.
All right, thank you.
All right, Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to the concept of top 10, customer service that you list has entrepreneurs. You commented that growing from 2 to 20, 2 to 50. A lot of these companies work LLCs, paying income tax. Out of the top 10, I'm thinking to my memory, some of the stuff I've looked at, out of the top 10, about 60% of them have a tax rate, income tax rate of 4%, less than 4%. We're getting down to 4.05. Is that an incentive for people to come to Michigan?
What I will say in terms of an incentive for people to come to Michigan, and then first I'll answer where is Michigan in terms of the tax broadly. Broadly, the Tax Foundation rankings just came out last week, and we're still 12th in terms of overall tax burden across the state. And I think when businesses move to Michigan, you look at income tax, you look at your property tax, you look at your payroll tax, you kind of look at everything in a holistic, but we're 12th when the Tax Foundation looks at that, which is pretty good, and we don't want to change that. We want to continue to improve that, but 12th ranking on all these other rankings that we looked at is actually a pretty high score. And the second piece is about where people move to, which I think is a really critical piece. When COVID provided a really unique experiment for where did people move when they had the ability to move, given remote work, and what we saw is that people didn't move to the lowest cost states. It wasn't everyone moving to these states that have the lowest cost. What they moved to was a lower cost state near their region. Because you don't want to move across, everyone didn't want to move to Mississippi, Alabama, these lower cost states. People from Massachusetts moved to New Hampshire. You know, so New Hampshire saw large growth away from Massachusetts. People from California moved out of California into Idaho, for example. Idaho grew 200,000 people in 3 years. They're a state of 1 million. They grew 20% in 3 years because of the COVID pandemic. So, and other places saw people move to Tennessee from Chicago and others because it was a within 2-hour flight or like 6-hour drive roughly is where people were deciding, I'm willing to move so I can still go to my family for Easter or go, you know, see people that are close by. But it's not just about low cost. It's how do we pair low cost up with all these other pieces.
Thank you. Representative Martin, you're all set.
Right, it's just that, you know, my perception that 4% is a good market.
Any other questions? Representative Van Workum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you guys' testimony, particularly on efforts to help entrepreneurs. I've worked or have tried to work on issues that would spur entrepreneur growth, get those guys that are building the new equipment or what have you out of the proverbial garage, so that we have our new businesses that you see kind of now as your leaders as part of your group. A lot of those guys started in their garage or had a concept and started out on their own. One of the things I have introduced this session is an R&D tax credit, and you guys mentioned that as well. What I'm also working on is an R&D tax credit, particularly for entrepreneurs. I know that term gets used a lot, and as I've done my research, everyone's for it, but don't necessarily know what it means or what it looks like. Have you guys put in any effort on what that may actually look like, and particularly on that entrepreneur side, and would be happy to work with you if you've done so?
So we have initial thoughts on areas like investing in Sparks and Anchors and providing additional VC seed funding, what's on the page. We're actually going through a project right now with a consultant firm as well as different organizations that think about entrepreneurs at a statewide level. So we brought in, for example, the Michigan Founders Fund and Doug Song and others who have basically provided input into what can the state do at a statewide level to drive entrepreneurship and growth, because it's exactly so critical. And what I would say is a lot of this is regional driven. So entrepreneurs obviously live in regions, live in markets, but what is it that the state can do broadly? And in terms of your R&D tax credit specifically, I would love to have a further conversation and provide you some insight there. We do see states that actually look at R&D as, okay, how do I support small businesses? Because they may need they may not have any income right now. You know, for example, they may be waiting to grow, taking some losses, and how can you provide an R&D tax credit that then allows that income to go for, give you that tax credit for 4 or 5 years if you lost that money before. So I think that there are examples that we've seen other states do it, and we'd love to sit with you and work through that.
Yeah, I'll just add that, our research shows that we're one of 10 states that does not have an R&D tax credit. And I think there's a lot of bipartisan appetite to dig into this. And I think there's a general consensus that the federal R&D tax credit, something that mirrors that, at least in broad terms for the purpose of this conversation, is, a viable place to start the conversation.
Yeah, that's the one I introduced, mirrors, but would love to talk to you guys about more focused on entrepreneurship.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I know that Representative Van Workum is, with his work, you're absolutely right. I know there is definitely an appetite to look at this on both sides of the aisle. I know there are a number of members who are working on some form of an R&D tax credit. So it's good to hear that that is part of the calculus as we're talking about diversifying how we are doing incentives here in the state. I actually want to talk a little bit more about that too. Just that and the payroll tax credit. It's kind of in the same vein of what Representative Van Workum asked. Just what are like some places that are doing that right as well? Also, just in broader sense, you said it as you were presenting it, but just why those particular credits again? The R&D tax credit and the payroll tax credit. I think you said it was targeting the knowledge economy better, but
Yeah, I think I'll touch on that first, and then I'll go to the detail of a payroll tax credit. So we actually had a good conversation with the MEDC. We shared similar slides with them, and they said, well, our pipeline is mainly manufacturing. And what we told them is that's probably true. When you have a tool that's targeted at manufacturing like SOAR, your pipeline will be a lot of manufacturing deals. If they had a tool that could attract knowledge economy jobs like a payroll tax credit, well, then their pipeline now is going towards what the tool that they have is given. So I think it's one of these that it's incumbent upon the legislature to provide the tools to get the jobs that we want to get. So that's why we're thinking about this as an effective toolbox. And the reason it targets knowledge economy jobs is because it is targeted at the payroll amount. And when you incentivize people who are bringing in higher payrolls, you're getting companies that are bringing in more people. These companies that are bringing in higher wage jobs and more people typically don't need, a large cash infusion to create a large plant. Some do, but most it's, a smaller R&D center, or it's a IT company coming and just filling in a space and an office space. And our downtowns, as you're all well aware, needs that infusion of people and the infusion of income. So that's why payroll tax credit makes a lot of sense and is something that of our competitive states, to get to your point, we looked at 10 different competitive states along the I-75 corridor, states we typically compete with. We are the only state that does not provide a version of this payroll tax credit, except for North Carolina, whose corporate income tax rate is 0%. So if the 0% is hard to, go beyond that. But when you look at the payroll tax credit, it's really a basic table stakes when a lot of companies are looking to grow.
And, for those that were not here, well, Good Jobs for Michigan, the beauty of this too is the money doesn't come, or the benefit to the company doesn't come until the good jobs come, right? It's contingent upon a higher wage job that's actually, in place, and there's no big risk on the front end. But, you saw on that EV transition slide how many jobs were at stake in Michigan if the Blue Oval site in Tennessee happened 3-4 more times in other places. And SOAR was really needed to make sure that we kept our share of our auto industry and manufacturing. That was, that was the tool related to that battle, and we've now actually grown, again, from 25% of the ICE market share to 28% of the battery manufacturing jobs. That was necessary, but to think about the knowledge economy and the fact that Michigan stayed flat over the past decade and the country has grown by 35%, we really need to think about this with urgency. And to both of your questions and comments, we're an organization, again, here to benchmark, provide data, convene, and advocate. So we absolutely want to be a resource to help look at what's best around the country and creative solutions and pragmatic solutions. That's what we're here to do, and we want to be a resource.
All right, thank you for that. Representative Farhat, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for being here. I'll first want to just highlight, a partnership in my own district that I know you folks have, which is with Henry Ford Community College. And the work you folks have done to kind of attract some private sector partnerships with the community college have been really outstanding. And I know there's a couple exciting announcements that'll be later in the month, but just wanted to emphasize that I think it is important to work a little more with our community college partners, where you have more affordable tuition rates most times, right? While also a more personal and wraparound approach that's available.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask a question as it pertains to the job market in Michigan. As we're looking at automotive jobs and the potential tapering off, or the potential for them to be at risk as a result of the shift towards EVs, has there been a conversation about the potential risk AI is posing to certain jobs across Michigan sectors? I know it's still very early on in where AI is, but the trajectory and the rate at which it's growing and the investments that companies like Google are making, or IBM, could potentially see jobs being displaced. Is there a conversation like that happening quite yet among the circles that you folks are in?
So I'll jump on that one first, and I would say one of our board members put it slightly differently, and I think this is a mentality that we all need to get a mindset shift. What is the opportunity with AI jobs? Because when the internet came out, people didn't know that there would be a Facebook. People didn't know about Google. People were using internet for simple, basic things, thinking they're going to change the computer. I think we don't know. And if I came up to you and I said, oh, I know what AI is going to do, you'd laugh me out of the room in 10, 15 years. But I would look at it in terms of what is the opportunity and how can we help grow entrepreneurs to take advantage of that AI technology that's coming. So I really think it is, how can we change the mindset shift, which is, hey, this is the risk versus this is a huge opportunity. The amount of jobs, the amount of innovations that's going to come from these new technologies that are coming, we need to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and so, if I may, Chair? Again, that kind of goes back to the question, right? So we're anticipating these jobs to be displaced. I didn't say we lose these jobs. I think, that they change, right? It changes what that job looks like. And I know it's presumptuous to see it in the long run, but is there any conversation now that's happening to say we're, trying to recruit for AI engineers, or we're looking to move jobs that are more clerical based to being based in a different profession, right? 'Cause I think there's going to be a learning curve for our workforce, is what I'm saying, right? And have we had this conversation with our private side? I guess this conversation is just now starting to happen, but that's what I'm very much interested in seeing. How can the private sector, and obviously partnership with the government, ensure that we can retrain our workforce, right? So we're ahead of that curve, and hopefully we can land these professional jobs.
Great question, and I think there's more. We can come back and sit with you and talk about this further. Love your passion. I'll say that at the core of the education work that the business leaders are involved in, the scaled work to really improve our education outcomes here, is this idea that we're teaching students, we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet, right? So there's this idea of a high standard, things that we know that math is important. It's become more important over the years. We know, but we also know that communication, collaboration, critical thinking, these are really the nimble, high standards that we have to have in our K-12 system and in our community colleges and such too, to be able to have the workforce that's prepared and nimble enough to be adaptable. And I think that's a longer conversation, but really that is at the core of reinventing our education system in Michigan. It looks a lot like it did in 1960, and the manufacturing floor and other places look nothing like they did in 1960. And so what are those disruptors, as well as raising the bar, because globally, we're kind of getting ourself, I don't want to use a crude reference here.
Further
So
askew.
we're not competing well across the globe on our education outcomes, and that leads directly to the quality of our workforce. And so we've got to really rethink and create urgency around some major disruptions and raising of the bar, as well as supports.
One thing I would add that's on the chart here is under talent, the last bullet is employer-led collaboratives. That's things like Going Pro. That's things like how do we get, the connections you had with Henry Ford Henry Ford College and businesses, that's a great example. When there's a job at the end of the day, people are going to go to that training and they're going to finish that training. The train and pray model is where you lose a lot of people and you don't get the completion rates you want. So the fact that we call it employer pull models or employer-led collaboratives, how do we bring employers in to retrain regardless of the disruption, whether it be the EV, AV, or AI, that's really what we want, is how do we draw in the employers to help drive the output.
You're going to see more from us really soon on a report coming out about community colleges in Michigan in particular, and what other states have done to get more folks through. But shout out to President Cavalluna there. Yeah. He's doing amazing work, and scaling some of those efforts is really, I think, the future for everyone.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have him in Dearborn, and thank you for the question. I'm looking forward to just working together through these complex solutions, right? Absolutely. We want to get ahead of it, hopefully. So thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you so much for your presentation today. All right, let's see, Representative Grant moves to approve the minutes from the March 14th meeting. Without objection, so ordered. We have no absent members, and there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.